Hello everyone, Ben here and welcome to the Dream Team Tonic Team Reveal Series. And today we have multi-format top 10 finisher Matt Woolcock, also known as WOOLY. How you doing?
Very well, very well. Afternoon, Ben. It's fun to. It feels like I've taken a bit of a break from fantasy football after the Euros. Been watching a lot of Olympics and getting right back into it now with the season a week away. So it's fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it myself now. Just want to get it started. I've got another week, haven't we? Friday deadline.
We have
Yeah.
certainly down still in the championship. We've got that starting tonight, but still got a week to build up and a lot of tinkering still to do, I think. But Dream team wise, I'm liking the price structure. I'm liking what's possible actually.
Yeah. Well, we've got your team on the screen here. Do you want to talk us through it?
Yeah, let's go for it. So I'll start probably from back to front, albeit the goalkeeper's probably, I think, the last thing I want to think about in a way. I want to see how much money I've got from elsewhere to put into that goalkeeper. I mean, first of all, the formation, a 3-5-2. I think all I see is formations with three at the back. Clearly, the defensive points. Certainly, last season, the points were in midfield and attack. I think of 10 players who scored over 300 points last year, 7 midfielders, 3 strikers. So says it all. So drifting towards a 3-5-2. We'll come on to the players who aren't there, who could turn this into a 3-4-3 potentially as time goes on. But starting at the back, I've spent a bit of money in Martinez. I did have 3.5 million to spend after picking the rest of the side. His price has gone up from what he was at the end of last season. So that's a little bit of a worry. So the fact that he's already fairly keenly priced at 3.5 is my worry, but there could be a bit of value dropping out of him. But if I look at the fixtures and the fact I don't really want to be making too many goalkeeper changes, he's got Europe. I realise there's a slight sacrifice on Carabao Cup in the first little chunk of the fixtures. He's solid. He's reliable. He's not going to get messed around too much in terms of benching. So he's going to have those double game weeks throughout Europe. So the fact I've got the money to get to him, I have gone there. So fairly happy with that. Shall I go on to the defence?
Yeah. How much was Martinez at the end of last season?
So he was 2.8 at the end of last season. So I'm not sure if he started on 3 or 3.5 and fell. I can't imagine he was cheaper than 2.5 at the start of last season. So yeah, that's a little bit of a concern. But if I'm not going to change the keeper all season, how much am I bothered? I don't know.
Might save you a transfer.
Yeah, exactly. So then across the back, Munoz, the way Palace ended last season, they've got the odd clean sheet in them. Munoz looks like he's one of the most attacking defenders at Palace. I know, to be honest, this defence looks quite FPL in terms of some of the templates for FPL at the moment. But again, the price is there. I'm happy with that. Certainly was considering a few other alternatives, but Munoz and Barco, again, similar kind of players in the sense that decent sides. They don't have Europe, so I've tried to mix it up a bit here. I've got some players who are in Europe and will last me through the autumn. I've got some other players who will get those Carabao Cup fixtures early on. So I didn't want to go too heavily either way towards that. Barco also attacking defender. If I see any drama that he might not start the season for Brighton or be too heavy a rotation risk over the next week, then he may well come out to someone else. So on the cheap side of things, I do want to keep the defence generally fairly cheap, and that's probably where Emi Martinez comes in. It's a little bit more expensive, so I've got to make some sacrifices elsewhere in defence. So if I don't end up on Munoz or Barco, I've got my eyes on potentially Ipswich or Southampton for some really dirt cheapies. So you've got Greaves at Ipswich for 1.5. He could come in. or the likes of Harwood Bellis at Southampton, who have really good fixtures to start off with, actually. I think the majority of those are at home for Southampton over the first 5. I think off the top of my head, they do have a tricky one against Manchester United, possibly away. But I think the money saved there for defenders who aren't our top point scorers is perhaps really going to be useful. So Minoz and Barco to start at the moment. The other one who is in there at the moment feels nailed. I like having those 3 light blue shirts in the side is Vardiol. How well he finished last season, carried on some of that form, hopefully into this season, and he's got goals, he's got clean sheets, albeit we all know City are that side who sacrifice a clean sheet late on quite often. I think huge points potential in Guardiola, and his points from last season don't really reflect his whole season in the sense that he very much did a lot better in the second half of the season when he nailed down his place.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick, and he's a very good price. I've got my eye on him, but I just because of Trent playing Ipswich first, it's making me turn my head to Trent. But it's a tricky one. Probably going to wait and see for myself. But the fixtures do look nice after Chelsea for Man City, so definitely.
Yeah, good. And it's really hard to tell what Chelsea are turning up to start off with. And well, I mean, you can see already I've got 5 from that Man City-Chelsea fixture. I can't really pick how that's going for the first game of the season. Chelsea away from Man City, that's a really interesting game straight off. So really looking forward to that match. If I still have 5 from Chelsea Man City when we kick off at the start of the season, will be God knows what I'll be hoping for.
Yeah, you've got $500,000 in the bank still as well. Is that right?
I do have $500,000 in the bank. So there's a few places that might end up. I don't mind having that $500,000 in the bank because that does mean I could hop on to multiple different bandwagons as time goes on. And I think a bit like some of the other formats where that cheap enabler, who is also a point scorer, may emerge, and it may be that. I mean, if I jump into midfield and start from the right to the left in this case, Emmy Smith Rowe at $2.5 million. I mean, it feels perfect. I mean, he's got all the quality in the world. We know Scott's love for Smith Rowe and everything that he could have been at Arsenal, but for some injuries and competition. It feels like he could have a very good season at Fulham, but he might not be the one at all. And it might be that $500,000 really helps jump onto someone else. The other thing that $500,000 will do is shield against the inevitable price changes, which we know on Dream Team are a little bit unpredictable.
Yeah.
It used to be, I think, much more predictable in the old format, but I think now that you can see that 0.1 decrease in a player, and then you might want to change him somebody who was the same price. You can't do that anymore if you've got no money in the bank. So I'm happy with $500,000 in the bank. But if I need to, before the season starts, upgrade Smith Rowe to a sort of £3 million player, that may well happen.
Yeah, nice little run for Fulham after the Man U game as well, and you get to see the lineups for the first game of the season, don't we?
Absolutely. So I think I'm going to be up at Fantasy Football Fest for this coming Friday. So we'll be hoping that there's not too much competition for the Wi-Fi and signal there to make sure we get all that news as it comes in.
That'll be a good night for you, mate.
It should be fun. It should be fun. I think the 90-minute deadline rule is obviously going to mean it's tricky for people who are managing both FPL and Dream Team. If you get that last-minute news with sort of 2 minutes to the deadline, which is entirely possible, you have to be even faster fingered to get those changes. But I think generally we seem to get the significant team news sort of 10 to 15 minutes before that 90-minute deadline. So I think it will be okay, and it will benefit those who are engaged and active just before the deadlines. It's certainly go against you. Sometimes what people think 20 minutes before the deadline or even post fake news, so to speak, can go against you a bit. But I think it tends to, that news 90 minutes before the deadline tends to be there. And I think last year the big thing before FPL kicked off was news around Gabriel for Arsenal not being in their lineup for the first match of the season, which those who are engaged in FPL got a bit of a jump into that first match with. So yeah, Smith Rowe's definitely in that category of maybe a quarter to the deadline change coming, but he's in Fulham for United away. As you say, that run of fixtures looks great.
Yeah, another one that just pops out for me as well. If Smith Rowe doesn't start, Pereira might be starting, and he's been on pretty much all the set pieces last season. Not all of them, but he takes a lot of set pieces. And he's took penalties in the past as well, so it could be an interesting one. 2.5 million, same price, Smith Rowe.
Yeah, 100%. No, so I like him, and the other one at 2.5 million, the other two I'm kind of keeping tabs on at 2.5 million. James Garner, who's injured currently. I think it's his calf that's currently injured. He may or may not be back for the start of the season. If he is back for the start of the season, I think last year it was the highest points per this season's £1 million in the game. So,
199 points, wasn't it?
199. So I think he's very clearly a player who I'm keeping tabs on, and he could come in. The other player who I like a lot is Philogene at Aston Villa. Now he's 2.5 million. I'm not sure he's going to be starting week in, week out for Villa, but he could be that player if he did somehow get into that Villa side due to injuries or whatever as a starter and starting in Premier League or Europe. Stranger things have happened than that happening at some point in the season, that he could be the player to go to. Did really well in the Championship, as we probably both know from last season when he was on loan, and now he's back to Villa. So I'll be interested to see how he goes, but he'll be more of a wait and see, I think.
What about Rodgers, 2.5 million as well for Villa?
So he finished really well last season, didn't he?
Yeah.
Actually had some appearances and he looks great. I'm again not convinced on how that rotation will work at Villa, but definitely on the radar. And I know that lots of managers in Dream Team as well actually are certainly looking at Rodgers. I think, I'm not sure, has the question, so been watching a lot of Olympics over the last couple of weeks, haven't so far kept up with all the teams' friendlies. I've tried to make sure I was up to date with most coming into this pod, but have we settled who will be the Villa penalty taker yet?
I don't know, because Tillemans was quite high up at Leicester when he was, I think he was second choice. And then when he came to Villa, obviously Douglas Luiz was taking him. But I believe if he's starting, he'll be one of the highest ones. But Watkins has got to put his hand up as well, hasn't he? If he wants to kick on with his career,
I mean, absolutely.
He's got to start taking penalties as well.
And goal scorer. I haven't seen Watkins in too many drafts to start, and I think that's probably because of Isak's fixtures. But if Watkins does get onto penalties, and I'm drifting into strikers already, but if Watkins is on penalties and with his prowess from last season, with Europe as well again, he'll start in the Champions League, clearly for Villa. He's got to be a real threat in fantasy football. So yeah, definitely looking there, definitely looking at Villa. Don't know, shall I move up the price bracket slightly to my £3 million players?
Yep, I'll just quickly say if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow. Yeah, okay, if you can crack on, mate. Your £3 million midfielder. I can't believe how cheap this guy is now.
No, so for £3 million for the following two midfielders, Brennan Johnson and Raheem Sterling, both of whom have got so much potential going forward. I mean, at the end of last season for Spurs, it felt like Brennan Johnson had cracked into being first pick for one of those wide slots for Spurs going forward. We know from the Forest days he's got goals in him. We know from even last season, without being in the side for the whole season, he managed to get 160 points. It feels like he's ahead of Kulusevski in the thoughts and the selection now. So I think he's really good, and I certainly have to admit I have a soft spot for Spurs, and tend almost not to pick Spurs players. Same with Championship fantasy football. I don't kind of pick Argyle players unless I'm really convinced. It's almost reverse bias there. But I think on Johnson's case, and you've certainly heard if anyone watches the Planet FPL podcasts, James is a obsessive Spurs season ticket holder, I think, there, and singing Johnson's praises as a potential option. So I do like Brandon Johnson a lot and think he's got a lot of potential there. We'll just have to see what Spurs do in the market, though, because all these rumours of Solanke and Tony flying about. If you throw them into the mix with Son, and if Richarlison is still there, and Kulusevski and Brennan Johnson, does that limit some minutes? Don't know.
Yeah, Kulusevski's been playing centre forward as well, and he's a midfielder in the game. But I can't see that happening if they get Solanke, and they've been linked with Tony as well. So.
No, I know. So there are going to be options opened up across the different clubs by those sorts of moves as well. Because if either of those two players, Solanke or Tony, move on, clearly we're going to have to be looking at which options work at Brentford and Bournemouth as well. So that's going to be interesting as to the cheaper options there. I mean, the sad thing probably is that those might drift on later into the transfer window when we want to be with European players. Going back into there, so that might not be an immediate option. I suppose. Just interested, Ben. Were you more surprised about the value of Sterling now being only 3 million?
Because I remember when he was like smashing them in at Man City, he was 7 million for the start of one season. So it's a big drop, 3 million now. And obviously, he's still got Europe. But obviously, Madueke's been doing well at the end of last season. So it'd be interesting to see how he's going to fit it all in at Maresca. He's signed Ward-Prowse as well. So it's going to be interesting what he's going to do.
And I know that there's more talk of potential signings coming into Chelsea as well. So it's not maybe Lukaku out. I mean, I still find that strange that Lukaku's listed in all these formats at the moment to potentially pick. I mean, that'd be madness if he ended up back in the consideration, but clearly he's not at the moment. I think that's the risk of putting Sterling in, is that whilst I think a lot of the predicted lineups will have him in for the first match, potentially with Nkunku and Palmer, Madueke, Jackson, they're all there and thereabouts for those sort of front spots at Chelsea. And you can see, Sterling losing his slot there fairly easily. So, and the added problem, we've got a lot of teams who've got, a fairly packed fixture schedule over the first 5 weeks. Chelsea, they're in the Conference League, aren't they? So their fixtures in the Conference League kind of come later than everyone else, even the Europa League and Champions League players. So, I mean, Sterling's in there for his ability, and if he does get that slot in the Chelsea front three more often than not, he's going to be a point scorer at 3 million. Is a bargain, as you say. That's why he's in there, for that bargain potential.
Yeah, we've got Nkunku as well this season.
I know, and Nkunku. I think I just blipped out.
Muted there.
Just blipped out. Apologies for that, and apologies if I'm a little bit stripy today with a light that seems to be on the blink a little bit in this room. So apologies for that.
No worries.
I think he's listed as a forward in this format, which puts me off a little bit, and his price isn't necessarily as keen as in other places. But he's got the potential, and seems to be that player on everybody's lips, isn't he? And Nkunku, I think there's a lot of thought that he's going to have a great season. So we'll see.
Yeah, he's been playing a little bit deeper than a striker, so it looks like he's playing a number 8 role. But to play with two, if he's playing the same way as he does with Leicester, he's been playing with 2 8s. So yeah, it'd be interesting. Probably be Palmer and Nkunku to start there.
No, I have to say I really enjoyed watching Leicester play last season down in Plymouth, and somehow how we got away without conceding a lot of goals in that game, I don't know. Really exciting side to watch Leicester were last season. Hope from your perspective they still play exciting football, but it could be a great season to be a Chelsea fan to watch them.
That result gave us a kick up the bum to get the season over with. We went on a little run to finish it off.
It did, and we ended up on a little bit of a run to actually stay up as well. So it was, worked out for us both in the end. So that was good. But yeah, definitely looking forward to seeing Chelsea play. And I mean, for that reason also, if I come on to the kind of more expensive end of my midfield.
Yeah, the next 4 players are top price players.
Absolutely. So Palmer's, spending a lot of change on him here, and I've seen a lot of people not have him in their drafts as well. So I've seen a lot of people taking the theory also with both of the players I'm coming to right now that they were away with England. Maybe they'll have a slow start to the season. Also the theory of, non-European players potentially coming in and having a bit of a kickstart. But I think Palmer, last season, 3rd top point scorer, 368 on penalties, and I presume that will prevail under Maresca. I think he's got to be a solid player in most sides for most of the season. I can't see any reason not to go with him.
Yeah, I like it. I've got my eye on him in a few weeks' time, game weeks' time, though. They start with Man City at home, and then they got Wolves away and Crystal Palace at home in the first 3 game weeks before international break. But the Carabao Cup starts for them in game week 4, doesn't it? They got a double game week there, so could possibly bring him in there.
Yeah, and then when they come on to they're obviously a European qualified side, so you're right. Carabao Cup is game week 4. You're right, not game week 2. And the other thing, the thing that would put me off Chelsea even more is, let's not forget they've got a playoff to get into the Conference League to go, which doesn't count for Dream Team. But if they were knocked out of that, that would throw the cat amongst the pigeons, I'd say, for Palmer, actually, in terms of what we're doing with him. He's still got the potential to outscore double game week players in a single game week. There's no question about that.
Yeah, definitely.
And then from the 3rd top scorer to the top scorer from last season, Phil Foden. And I think with the news of Alvarez going, I realised that we'll probably see more of Doku this season than certainly at the start of last season. And Silvinho's come in. But I can't see that Foden isn't just the immensely talented, gifted player and really has that trust at Manchester City from Pep. So I don't think Foden will be subject to too much Pep roulette. Will he start the first game of the season? Well, I'm waiting on the Community Shield to see clues from there, really, on what Pep's plans are and what Pep says. So we'll see. But unless I don't think Phil's starting against Chelsea, I kind of want to go in on Foden as well as Haaland, who obviously will come on to next.
Yep. So this is your vice captain.
So this is my vice captain at the moment. I haven't given the vice captain too much thought because, I think Salah's should be nailed, and I'll go on to why Salah for captain in a second. But Haaland's got the potential. We've seen him scoring, a hat trick in recent days. He's got the potential to go absolutely huge, whoever he's against. Chelsea have looked not great at the back through some of their pre-season. So same old for Chelsea. Could every bit as well destroy a team, like so many sides nowadays, could destroy a team or could concede 4. And, who who are you likely to concede 4 against? Well, Haaland and Man City. So I'm pretty happy with Haaland as that vice captain pick. You probably see my team isn't necessarily optimised for captain picks for game week 1, with one exception coming up. So Haaland as vice captain, I think I'm pretty happy with. I won't offend you by saying Johnson might have been my next captain pick against Leicester in that first game week.
Is he your third choice, is he?
Possibly. I mean, lucky you don't have to have it, but where would I go third choice? Palmer or Foden, probably. Just for that, the chart, probably Palmer with penalties potential, but that's tricky. I think Haaland, I think in FPL there's been this fashion for people to be building drafts without Haaland and without Salah. And I know that in Dream Team as well, we're seeing some with only one of them. But I think I just don't want to see Haaland not in my sides. That day where he scores 3 or 4 and everyone then brings him in, I want to have him in, for those who haven't got him in. And Salah, I mean, he's one of the greatest of all time in fantasy football. I think we've heard a couple of credible arguments as to why not to start with him. Liverpool's run of fixtures, though, with Ipswich away, Brentford at home, you've then got United away. Well, Salah's a big game player who scores in big games. And Forest at home, before they then have Europe. I mean, clearly, even if they had the Carabao Cup, Salah might not start. I mean, for me, I just want those premium players who are scoring points throughout the season in there. I'm probably going to have, I've already in my mind got a little bit of tinkering to do when we see who the best enablers and bandwagons might be there. So I want to have those big players from the start that I don't need to worry about. And for captaincy, that's the other reason he's in from the start. Ipswich away, he'll be my captain for. He won't be the captain in game week 2 because that will either go to Erling Haaland with Ipswich at home or it will go to a Carabao Cup player. Not 100% sure on that yet. I think I've seen Ipswich come up from League One through the Championship and now into the Premier League because they were rivals of Argyle a couple of seasons ago. Again, love that story of Ipswich and love the fact they're in the Premier League. But I think they may get exposed defensively in some of the early fixtures. Certainly, I think they've got when things go well for them and when they're a great team and they've got some great assets in there. And I said defensively they might get exposed, and yet I'm mentioning kind of Greaves and Davis as players I might go to. But I certainly think there will be the games where they do concede multiple times, and that could be Salah in game week 1.
Yeah, I like your team, mate. Big omission there for me though. No Newcastle.
No Newcastle. Yeah, this was in my mind. This is a bit of a no Newcastle draft, and when Newcastle have got Southampton at home to start with, who have obviously come up. I've got a Southampton supporting friend who's a bit pessimistic about their chances in that one to start with. Then they've got obviously Bournemouth and the Carabao Cup in game week 2. I think it is a huge omission at the moment. I think if you look at this and Fergie's draft yesterday, and this hasn't been done in any way with this in mind. It's entirely coincidental, but I think the only 2 players that I've got in common with what we saw from Fergie yesterday are actually Salah and Haaland. And I think when I saw that last night stream with 3 Newcastle in it, Livramento, Gordon and Isak, I did look at that and think, that could go off and go very much against this side. So I think getting Isak in, I mean, there are some obvious points here of change that if Palmer or Foden don't look like they're starting the season for any reason, including kind of England hangovers, then that would be an obvious move to go straight into Isak from one of those. And if both of them didn't want to Gordon, that would sort all those problems out straight away. And the other route would be potentially to downgrade Martinez. And I know we're still kind of looking for those cheap goalkeepers. So whether I could free up $1 million from Martinez down to Henderson, for example, if Henderson is the Palace starting keeper, and that alongside that $500,000 that I've got, you're starting to see options for, moving Sterling up to a Newcastle player. So there's definite options, and I if the season started now, I'd be quite happy with this side going into it. But I think there's going to be, will I twitch before the start of the season and put those Newcastle players in? That's the big question.
Yeah. I was just looking at, obviously you've put your big boys in midfield already, but that you could also think of that as a placeholder, couldn't you? So you've got the money there to bring them back in when you do get to the deadline. You could maybe change something.
You absolutely could. So I think, we talk a lot about structure, of course, in the different fantasy football formats. None more so than the kind of sadly now ended Sky Fantasy Football. Quite looking forward to giving Cloud Fantasy Football a try this season, which I know has been started by friends of this channel in FF Stuff and also Ian Parron. So looking forward to giving that a bit of a go. But the structure kind of debates that I had across all the different formats, I think apply to Dream Team in this kind of format of Dream Team absolutely, totally as well. And I'm not sure we sort of could see it at the start of last season exactly, but I think having some of those different price points is useful. And I think the fact that I've got some of those expensive midfielders who could be placeholders for absolutely anyone is good. And that's perhaps also the slight weakness of having £2-3 million midfielders, is I can't do a like-for-like switch from one of those to a £4 million midfielder. So that's a little bit of a weakness perhaps there. But I'm still pretty happy with that, the look of that side. I think that's got a lot of points in it.
Yeah, I was looking at Sterling's stats there. He got 22 tackling returns last year. So it's quite gone under the radar there, hasn't he?
He has gone under the radar, and I suppose anyone goes under the radar against Cole Palmer's season that he had last season. But Chelsea, really good attacking side, and we all know that Jackson wasn't banging in the goals last season, so the chances do get spread around. The penalties don't, but the chances do get spread around. And Sterling has certainly got assists in him. And I just waiting on that news as to whether it looks like he's going to be in that starting lineup for the start of the season. And I think that if you think about what you were talking about in building into the likes of Palmer later down the line, part of the thinking of having Salah, Haaland, Palmer and Foden is I've got a few risks in this side. I've got a few risks of, is Smith Rowe going to play every match? Probably. Is he going to be injured after game week 1? Possibly. Is he going to be effective for Fulham, and how are they going to use him exactly? There's a bit of a risk there. There's definitely a bit of a risk in Sterling. He might play game week 1 and then might end up with 2 matches rotated. I think Barco is definitely a bit of a risk on minutes he gets. So there are definitely players who may be I may be having to put transfers in across game week 2 through to sort of game week 4 and 5 when Europe starts, but they're generally the either non-European players who will be building towards hopefully some European players when we see some sort of enabler emerge to do that, or there are some of the cheaper players as well. So I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah. Obviously you've got 8 European playing players, so you're not really targeting any Carabao Cup players? in the second round, second game week?
I think there are a couple of questions. So I think the no Newcastle is alongside that Carabao Cup question is important, and you can look at it from two angles. Will the players who play in the play in the Premier League side start the Carabao Cup fixtures? So I'm not as sold on this base your game week one side just on that one extra fixture. They might not start. Having said that, we'll see. By game week 2, we'll see the draw. So it might be I move one or two players onto Carabao Cup players as soon as game week 2 to then move on to a European player later on. So the draw will be important. But I just think I don't really want to base my entire structure and thinking around that one game. On the flip side of that, the no Newcastle problem is a real worry to me, and that there is a definite case for somehow getting a bit of Newcastle in here, which would also get a bit more Carabao Cup exposure too. So I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah.
And it is only one match, and we'll see who plays.
Yep. Excellent stuff. Thanks for coming on, Woolly.
That's okay. Anytime, Ben.
Brilliant, mate. I'd just quickly talk through the Patreon. Yes, so Wooly's a member of the Patreon. We've got over 100 managers now in our Discord. I've got also exclusive articles. So Scott's just done an article targeting August. It's fantastic. You have to read it. Obviously, Woolly would have read it by now, wouldn't you?
Yeah, totally.
We've got my fixture ticker. Who's got all the permutations of where the cup draws are and the group matches in the European games. So obviously we were talking about it there. Game week 4, there's going to be a Carabao Cup third round in there, and so the teams that are playing in the Europa League and the Conference League will be playing in the game week 4, while the Champions League teams are playing. So the same midweek. So that's on there. You can have a look. Also, Scott's added some player data on there today. That's excellent. Points per million. It's very good to look at. There's also other stuff on there. And obviously, we get the early access to the podcasts. So this will be straight out on the Patreon. Early access as usual. Just thanks for coming on. But it's been good to look at your team. I like your team. It's a lot different to what I've seen. There's no There's been a bit of a template with the strikers, hasn't there? Salah, Haaland, and Isak. It's good to see something different.
Yeah, no, as I say, it's come about through. I think at this point, quite a lot of thinking, not taking too much notice of others. How that changes over the next week, we'll see. We'll see how much that Newcastle threat emerges in my head.
Yeah. And on that note, we'll say goodbye. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.